Thank you.
Two Laurens and three Bobs.
I know.
What are the odds?
It just hit me.
You know, I didn't hear from Bob number 3. I sent him, as you saw, I sent stuff out to him, and
Yeah.
I don't know if he's away or what, but Lauren, he lives near you on Williamsburg.
Right. Yep. Yeah. So we have a
So
strong representation in the.
We're all about it, you know, a 9-iron away from each other through the woods. Maybe a driver, and it's kind of a funny story. I met him on the trail, on the Hammonasset River Trail. He was walking north, I was walking south, and we just struck up a conversation. Now, who strikes up a conversation on a trail with some stranger? So I don't know. And we just kind of hit it off, and he knew my name, I knew his name, and then I put it all together after I got that email. And I thought, oh, okay, he'd be a good addition. I think he's an former FBI, or he is an FBI agent. Or maybe he just retired, something like that. And had a nice dog and a big boat. So it sounds like a good guy, but I don't suspect he's going to join tonight. So why don't we just call this meeting to order for May 28th? And we'll start off with the pledge, as we always do. So I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Excellent. All right, cool. Get that out of the way. Thank you. Is everybody get a chance to look at the minutes? And again, you know, like I said in an email, these aren't very descriptive minutes by any stretch. And that's the way the town does it. So when I've written minutes for other organizations, they're pretty descriptive. These aren't. So I can make them descriptive, or I'm just following kind of what the town does. So is there a motion to approve the minutes at all? Is that Leo? And a second?
Second.
Second. I saw Jean first. Thank you. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Great. So that's all set. Thank you. Lauren, is there anybody on for public comment?
There are 2 people on. One is Gus. I'm sure everyone's shocked.
Okay.
I'm not sure if anyone wants to give public comment. You can do so by raising your hand and I will allow you to speak. Everyone's staying pretty quiet, so I think you can go ahead.
Okay, great. Jumping right into the agenda. Bring it back up. Continued discussion on questionnaires for public and town employee comment. You know, I was talking to Lauren earlier today, and you know, guys, I'm at a loss really on. I thought I would have a better handle on where we were going with the public comment, with the questionnaires after we had our first public little forum. And I'm as clear as mud on which way we're going from a questionnaire perspective. I still don't have a good handle on where we're going, and I don't want to lead any. When I come up with questions, when I read them back to myself, they sound leading, and that's the last thing we want to do, is lead anyone with where we think they or we should go. I don't have a heck of a lot of experience in doing any of that, so I'm kind of using a little bit of common sense, which I could go either way. From that perspective. So what are you all thinking about the questionnaires, both from a town and from a town employee? Both are really and critically important. So any thoughts on that? No. All right. Well, maybe
Now, the only thing I'm thinking of is that it's analogous to if you're working on a product, it's customer discovery, you're trying to understand what problem, again, we go back to the problem idea. What
Right.
problem are you trying to solve for a potential customer with a new product?
Right.
And you don't ask leading questions because then you're basically getting the answer what you want.
Right.
And they're not open-ended, but they're questions that it's hard to do in a questionnaire. Typically you do it in an interview. Then you kind of just follow where the customer is taking you in the conversation. Which kind of gets me back to the idea that if we were to just do that ourselves and we get some better sense of the problems we're trying to solve and then come up with potential solutions, but we're stuck on one or two or three options, asking questions, posing, this is an issue we're addressing, here are three possible solutions, which do you prefer and why? But
Right.
it's going to be an open-ended kind of response, and then that's just, depending on how many people respond, it's very burdensome to try to categorize. Free text is never good.
Right. Right. No, because that skews all the data, you know. Okay. I was really hoping we'd get a better handle on this after the last public forum, but it was great. Don't get me wrong. The people that called in were really helpful and had some great comments, but it didn't kind of help me kind of narrow the focus down to what we should be asking.
Should we think of it more like if you were putting forward a referendum for people to vote on, saying, should the town of Madison do this to address the following?
Yeah. That's a
Now,
good thought.
something along those lines.
Like a referendum question.
Yeah, not quite as formal, but along those, should we do this to fix this? A scale of 1 to 5, yes or no.
Yeah. You know, Lauren's first stab at it with the way back when, pre-COVID. You know, I keep going back to those and looking at those, and then I look at some of the things that Helen did, and then you know, then I think we had just one more conversation after that about it, and we kind of didn't get very far on that either. So, okay. Maybe when we talk to the Board of Selectmen tonight, we can, I'll be happy to tell them the bad news that we're not really getting anywhere, or not getting as far as we wanted to be from a questionnaire perspective. And maybe they can provide some insight on that too. There's 5 other people on the Board of Selectmen, assuming they all zoom in. Maybe we can get some different perspectives from there as well. So if not, we take another stab at it. Maybe we start over. Maybe we start over with Lauren's first shot at those questions.
But
You know,
what do we get? What are we trying to get out of the questions? I'm still stuck at. Oh, asking what people think. We've already. I mean,
maybe I just need to kind of formalize them and throw them back out to you guys. And then see what, you know, I don't think we have one good document that gets everything on one page. 1 or 2 pages, one page for the town, one page for the town employees. All right.
You know,
I Googled the heck out of this stuff, and there's not a lot out there on that. So
let me send this to everyone else.
oh, what you did, Leo? Bob?
Yeah, I'm gonna hopefully I have everyone's email.
Can we, is it okay to talk about this even though it's not on the agenda? It's kind of on the agenda. Yeah.
It's part of your discussion item.
That's good. I agree.
I mean, if we
are trying to develop, I may need to call back in. I've got a bad echo.
Okay.
Sorry.
So what I asked Bob to do was he and Leo brought up that suggestion on what's the problem we're trying to solve. And Bob offered to kind of coalesce what our thoughts were on what the issues are. And I sent some of mine over, and then he had his, and then he kind of put it together in a document, and Leo then reviewed it as well. And then we
I just sent
brought it to you guys for your review and any edits or additions you want to make as well. So you're getting this for the first time right now. So
Yeah, definitely consider it a working document.
Yeah.
because It's not done.
For sure.
But I still go back to the idea that it's just the engineering. I need to understand the problem I'm trying to solve.
Right.
And it's better to take more time defining the problem, trying to solve it, if it's ill-defined.
So we've got essentially what, 4 challenges? Low voted?
That
No?
Or I think coalesced for me in all the conversations. I still think there's more. I just can't remember the specifics. And
Right.
I'm not even sure the third one is actually a challenge, other than there are some good points made that it could actually be a feature.
Mhm. Yeah, the 4th one's important too.
That's an implied, it's not really, no one's ever said it's a challenge, that's just implied.
Right.
We've been told to look at an ethics committee, so that's implying that there's a, you can, but
When we've had 10 years of town meetings and have had 2 quorums, you know, that
I can't remember.
those are the implications right there. There are
I had-
implications right there. So
I had 4 years, so maybe it must be 10 years. I have to change that.
I think that the items that the documentation that Gus sent over showed 10 years of.
Is it? Okay, I couldn't remember, I was just typing.
I guess the one thing I would add to the document is that it isn't just the lack of attendance at the town meeting. It's also, I think, lack of attendance at the voter referendums as well. The ones that we do every year for the budget, which are, 10 or
Okay.
15%, which is all sort of the same theme. But I'd probably add that in there because
Sure.
one of the things that may come up as we go through this is, do you have an RTM which would solve some of those problems? Because they really are the same problem. People don't come to talk about small ticket items or sort of small at the town meetings. They don't even come out to vote for the budget.
Right.
Lauren, you sent it around. The number, we've never gone past 20%, have we?
No.
Which to me is appalling to think about. We're letting ourselves be taxed by 20% of the people.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So I'd probably add that in. And I guess the other thought I had, Bob, I know you're on a little bit of a horns of a dilemma. I actually kind of like some of the questions that Lauren did come up with originally, because
Yeah.
I think it does frame, how people are using government, how they react to it. For example, I attend town meetings. Never. We're going to get some of that information. I attend referendums. I vote. This is how I communicate with the town. There's a lot in here we could use, I think.
Right, and my counter to that is that we know those answers, it's 20% at most.
Yeah.
So, it's different if you're trying to connect, I do vote, and here are my other answers. If you want to make some kind of correlation between people who vote and the other answers they give. But more than likely, if you don't vote, you're not going to fill this form out. You could very well be. I don't know. It'd be really interesting to see if we get 40% response to the questionnaire and 20%, what percent say they vote, and what percent say they don't. Almost as
I hate to be a skeptic, but I have to believe that we'd be lucky to draw 10% of the people responding to
Yeah,
this questionnaire, to be perfectly honest.
It's more like, email campaign. It's
Yeah.
3-5% is you're doing good.
Well,
I mean, when they did, Lauren, when they did the Academy survey, do you recall what the response was there?
I don't know for certain off the top of my head. I know it was, trying to think, because we went over when we did the first survey that was just through the town before when they did those like
When Henry
pop-up
did it?
workshops. Yeah, that was not very well filled out. It was like 400. But when they did the survey through Great Blue, we paid for 4,000 phone calls and we hit all 4,000 phone calls. But that's because Great Blue got our directory and they made those phone calls, not necessarily because people reached out to us.
Right.
And then we allowed for an online portion too. During that time, I want to say it was like 500 that submitted something voluntarily, like of their own volition.
By the way, Jean is out with the attendees right now. You might want to bring her in.
I'll fix that.
Oh, Gina, I didn't send it to Gina.
What if we turn that question around, Peter, and why don't you vote in referendums, or why don't you vote in general elections?
It's great. Yeah, why don't? That's a great way of saying it.
Let's write that down. I still go back to the fact that Madison is so highly educated, and maybe it's a wrong assumption that education equals active public participation in your community, or maybe I just should blow that theory right out. But I just seem that people are so smart in this town, and when they're confronted with a problem, it can be fixed. I'm convinced of that. But just getting them to fill out a survey too. We don't have a budget for Great Blue, I don't think, Lauren, right now. So it's going to be all, I think we'll probably get a better hit from the town employees than we will from the electorate,
Which honestly, I almost care more what they think than I do what the town thinks, because the town has kind of already voted to a certain extent by being apathetic. I don't mean to be rough on the town, but I mean, the town's not participating, but maybe the employees will have better insight, and maybe that will lead us partly why the people don't get involved.
I absolutely think that's true. I do. Lauren, any word on if we're going to get into some conference calls with some folks soon? Anybody raise their hand for that yet?
So what I'm trying to do, and I was working with the webmaster last week, is just do a preliminary survey for the staff. So last week when we met, we had come up with like 4 questions that you guys wanted staff to answer. So I wanted them to be able to fill that out anonymously. So there were a couple of things I had to do to get that up and running to be done anonymously. And then I wanted to give the staff enough time to complete it.
Okay.
So I'm hoping that you guys will have that answer back by next week's meeting, like whatever emails from staff by next week's meeting. And I told staff if they wanted to get back to me with dates and times that they would be available for a phone call with you guys, that we would do that.
Okay, great.
So I wanted to give them the option, we talked about anonymously because, no one wants it to seem like they're, saying anything negative about a current or past administration. So I'm not sure who will take us up on the phone calls, but it's out there.
Okay. You don't happen to have those 4 questions that we were going to ask Candy, do you?
Let me just hold on, because I have to switch between 2 portals. So just give me 1 second.
Just so I can put it in my notes.
Yep.
So Bob, on your document, some of the comments that Peter made would be a good addition to that as well. And there's got to be more too that we've talked about.
Yeah, I captured the referendum.
Yeah,
I just added in the low voter turnout at town meetings and referendums.
okay.
So I think that's a good point.
So the questions that I have for the senior staff survey were, do you find that there are any issues with the 2-year turnover for first selectman?
Mhm.
What are your thoughts on the town administrator / town manager position for the town of Madison? What are your thoughts for boards and commissions members? And then is there anything else that you would like to, I'm sorry, what are your thoughts on an ethics commission? And then is there anything else that you would like to share with the committee? And so they're all open-ended. These
That's great.
ones, we didn't give survey questions that were like on a scale that which what we would do for the public. So these are all open-ended. They just have an answer box where people can type whatever they want to type.
Fantastic. Yeah, if we can get that back for next week, that would be wonderful. We're short a day, so. but, you know,
Lauren, what's the question regarding boards and commissions? What was your question
Yeah.
there again?
No, so sorry, I corrected myself. That was, what are your thoughts on an ethics commission for the town of Madison?
But you also made a comment about boards and commissions, or was that not separately?
I corrected myself. I didn't mean to say that.
Was that one of the challenges that we talked a little bit about? Is it a requirement that members of boards and commissions be nominated by the local Democratic Republican committee? Or
Town
is that not,
committees.
is that a requirement?
No. The short
Is
answer
it-
to that is no, it's not a requirement. It is the practice that we have in town because for a very long time that seemed to be the most efficient way to make sure that we were appointing people to appointed boards and commissions that were well suited for those boards and commissions. So we even did that for unaffiliated voters. If you were an unaffiliated voter and you applied for a board or commission, your application would still go to one of the town parties and they would nominate you on behalf of their party. It was our way of making sure that the boards and commissions not only were staffed with people who were qualified, but also that there was an equal enough mix of the two party affiliations so that no one board or commission could be, optics wise, could be seen as being run by a town political party.
That goes back, kind of harkens back to the question on how do you get unaffiliated voters to participate when you only have Republican and Democratic.
So that also, yeah, and that kind of, I captured what you said there in a challenge practice that members of boards and commissions should be nominated by a local political committee, Republican and Democratic, as one of the challenges. Because you could say that creates the only phrase I can think of is old boys network. If you don't know someone, you can't help.
So,
So-
just to, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but just to kind of clarify a little bit. When I started with the town about 6 years ago, I wouldn't know who was applying for what board or commission until it was ready to go to the Board of Selectmen for approval. And we decided way back then that probably wasn't the best way to do it because we were afraid that we were losing unaffiliated voters who perhaps didn't have an in to one of the town committees to be nominated by them. So what we did is we created the new application process, and that's online on the town website. And that goes, every single application for any appointed board or commission goes to the nominating chair of both town committees and me. So all three of us get every single application. I review every single application, and then I reach out to both nominating committees and we talk about whether or not there's an opening on that board or commission. And then if there is an opening on the board or commission, what's the current composition? So if it's a 7-member board and right now it's 3 Republicans and 3 Democrats, whether any of those are unaffiliated, but they've been nominated by one of those town parties, then we say, okay, we have this 7th position. This is an unaffiliated voter. And if one of you would like to nominate them, great. If not, I would set up a time for them to speak with the first selectman, and then they could get on a board of selectmen meeting that way as well. So we definitely have tried since I started here to make it way easier and a little more like to make the process more transparent. But I am worried in the things I've been hearing from the public that I don't think unaffiliated voters realize that that's what happens. Like, I don't think they realize that there's this, transparent process where everyone is like, from the beginning, we all know what's available, who's applied for it, how we're going to get that person on the committee or not.
They definitely don't know. I mean, I would have, no, I doubt anyone knows that.
Yeah.
I certainly wouldn't know, I just thought if you're an unaffiliated voter, you're completely out of the political process because you can't get anywhere. That's good to know. Yeah.
Well, I'm unaffiliated and I'm here. So
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
it works.
Somebody has to want to
It worked for
participate.
me too, because I had no idea what the process was. I just answered an email that Lawrence had.
Yeah. I mean, somebody has,
Right.
Right.
It worked.
That's great. See, it proves your point, Lauren, that it works, So that's fantastic.
people have to want to get involved. And I think if you go back 20 years to my last charter review, there's certainly been a lot of progress made to get people involved. I mean, again, could there be more? Could there be more promoting it? I'm sure, and hopefully, that will continue. But I think it's, and if you look at the composition, a lot of the boards, there are a lot more unaffiliated voters than there used to be. So,
But if you told me I had to go to one of the political nominating committees to get nominated, I would have just said no.
Yeah.
I would have backed out. I wouldn't have bothered.
well, a lot of people are unaffiliated because it's not that they don't have views one way or another. They just don't want to get sucked into the politics. So,
Shifting gears on.
All right.
unaffiliated
So I
voters.
capture that. We can wordsmith it later and check it here.
Yeah. Thank you, Bob.
Thank you.
On Gus had sent out a document last week about the RTM form of government. And I'm thinking about participation and unaffiliated voters again. That wouldn't solve anything with unaffiliated voters. You still have to be nominated by a party, and you have to, I think you have to commit to a party. But it would help with participation to an extent. And I'm just wondering what are some opinions out there about that. I haven't talked to anybody when we did our interviews. Leo and Helen did with Fairfield, but I would really like to talk to Branford. And Gene, Peter Anderson and I traded like 3 telephone calls each, and I think we both gave up on each other, but I need to reach out to him again. But I'd really like to understand what Branford does from an RTM perspective, how that works, or doesn't work, or pros and cons. And so I need to get educated on that form of government, which I know not a lot about, quite frankly.
Why is it that it would, maybe I didn't follow but you said you'd still have to get nominated by one of the parties?
I believe you do.
Am
I not right? I could be wrong on that.
I don't think we know, but I would think one of the things we would try to do if we went that way is to say we don't want party affiliation. That we need 40 people that are in the RTM. I'm picking a number, I have no idea.
Yeah.
And everybody apply to City Hall. And you don't have to state what your political preference is. In fact, we wouldn't even allow that to happen.
I think what I read when I was doing some research, I think what I read is, they look to the community at large.
Right.
I mean, maybe there are certain requirements as far as parties, but I think when looking for, because you're looking for a lot of people.
Right.
So I don't think it's limited to parties. I think they're looking for people that are willing to represent districts, and I don't think party affiliation. And I can't remember which of the towns that I looked at as far as the process, but I think that can certainly be worked around. I don't I don't think that that would be a, I guess,
Yeah.
I guess my, and again, this is just maybe my lack of knowledge versus any direct knowledge, is that we talk about participation, getting that many people that are willing to take on that role could be challenging. And, and again, I have heard, and maybe it's more from, because Brantford is so close, I have heard that it can be a contentious, maybe that's not a bad thing. I'm just
That's a
saying,
good thing.
yeah, I mean,
Tension is good. You get
because
solutions.
again, you're getting more participation, and
Right.
participation seems to be something that we're all, it comes up a lot in our meetings. I don't see a town manager. I mean, there are reasons for a town manager or a town administrator, or different types, mayor, council, et cetera, but I don't think that necessarily solves the issue of participation. I think that's looking more toward the type of government, how the process of the professionalism, et cetera. I think participation is a separate issue. So if you're talking about participation, probably an RTM, would bring you the close, in my opinion, would
Right.
bring you the closest to getting a lot of community participation.
Right. I don't, I'm just,
Well,
yeah, I need to look at that.
yeah, I don't know about that. I mean, I think you might get maybe even more political participation because you now have these additional roles to fill. And, and this is just my opinion. I mean, I don't know that any of these structures necessarily address voter participation. I mean, to me, more the structures get into how does the balance of power
Right.
shift, or how does it get or not, right? Because when you look at our current setup, particularly with the quorum, one would argue there is no separation of power. The board is the legislature in all effects, because whatever they propose passes, because there's never a quorum. So there is no separation of power. Whereas if you had an RTM, there is a clear delineated separation of power, but who's going to show up, for those spots? And that's where you sort of get into the participation, but that isn't necessarily an electorate issue. That might become more of a political party issue and how they fight for those spots, or don't, And then with respect to, Bob, your earlier point, when you look at Fairfield's charter, so Fairfield has the RTM, and they have by nomination, and they also have by petition. So you could be nominated by a party, or you could go through the petition process. So I would tend to think, to address those types of issues is relatively easy. I think the bigger thing is, do you just blow up the structure of government and replace it with something else, and why? So I think those are some of the sort of first principles that we need to figure out, which is what we've been talking about. What's the problem? What are we trying to address? How are we trying to address it?
Yeah.
But if we're amending the charter, I mean, one could theoretically say, so long as it isn't against general statute, you could amend the charter to operate however you need it to operate to address those issues.
Sure.
Yeah, because the challenge we're trying to solve is not the low voter turnout. We're not going to get more people to vote.
Right.
Don't bother, because that's everywhere. The challenge we have is the impact of low voter turnout, which is what Leo just said. There's no legislative body to balance. There's no separation of powers. So you have a government designed to have executive legislation, and the legislators just never show up. And nothing we're going to do is going to make them show up. So it's got to either change to the way it's formulated or whatever. But each one of the challenge, even the 2-year term for board members, that's not a problem. That's potentially creating a problem. So I just feel like challenges I wrote are not actually the challenges. They're the cause of the problems that need to be solved for.
Mhm. Mhm.
It's interesting.
It's good stuff.
Hmm.
Good stuff.
And then, you know, just kind of connecting back to the questionnaire. So what is the purpose of the questionnaire, and what is the purpose of the questionnaire to which audience? So like, you know, if we could use, well, we've got the first 4 questions that Lauren is helping out with, and that'll give some insight, and they're more open-ended. So it's more like collecting the information that we've collected to date.
Mhm.
You know, and I agree with all the comments of everybody. I just don't know what the return rate for the broader questionnaire that we send out to the public is going to be. But, you know, maybe it's at a point where instead of worrying about what that might be, maybe it's 1, maybe it's 1%, maybe it's 0%, maybe it's 100%. Maybe we just do something. And even if we could use the sort of town employees as a pilot to think about, all right, so after we get those first 4 questions, you know, with what has been developed already from Lauren, from Helen, you know, are there certain questions that we could at least take from there that maybe we could edit in a way that would be a little bit more applicable to the town's folks, the employees, and then see how the results come back, see if those questions are understood, see if we're getting the type of answers that we would expect, not from a, I hate the government or I like the government or things like this, but are we getting the responses the way we would want the responses to look? You know, are the questions being understood? And then if so, then maybe it's just, all right, well, broaden it out a little bit, maybe do the employees again, or maybe just say, let's iterate, let's send it out and see what happens. And if we need to send a follow-up, well, then maybe we send a follow-up. I don't know.
You know, I think we can over-engineer
Yeah.
Yeah.
the questionnaire. I mean, we may, you know, you pick something and we could design it and still not get a lot of responses, or you know, a very low number of responses. I just don't know. I think even though there were only 4 participants last week in the public hearing, and you know, you could say, well, these people don't necessarily represent the, you know, the general electorate, but they're the people that are willing to take the time to, you know, participate. And, you know, I thought some of the comments, you know, were very good. And I think, you know, a lot of them fell into a lot of the things that we've been talking about. So how do you weight it? Public hearings and employees, I think, have a lot, just again, this is just my opinion, not have a lot more weight than putting out a general questionnaire. Town's done a lot of different questions. I'll just go back to Academy, way early on, you know, and it wasn't a, you know, it was just a general questionnaire, and a lot of people came back and answered it. And if you looked at the answers to what the public said versus when they actually came out to public hearings, they were totally opposite. So, you know, how much weight do you put on these questionnaires?
Yeah.
Mhm.
I guess you could argue the same thing with public hearings. People that have a particular agenda or opinions are going to be, you know, obviously are going to want to participate and have their voices heard. But there's just people that are generally happy with the way things are going, and they don't really know that much about it, and they don't really want to stick their toes in the water, probably aren't going to.
Right. No, you're right. I
Hey,
wrote.
Lauren, Gus is out there raised with his hand up if he wants.
Let Gus speak.
I'll let him in now.
Yeah, may as well.
Gus, you have to unmute yourself.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes.
This discussion, I don't know whether you've got reference to state statutes and things like that, but just for your information, this issue of petitioning and whatever is the Connecticut General Statutes 9-453. And that specifically talks about 1% of the voters in the particular district as being the minimum amount and a maximum of no more than 7,500. Now in Brantford, their RTM, you can either be nominated by a party or you can petition. And they use the petitioning as 1% of the candidate of the voters in the district that they're running from. Waterford is the same thing. They pretty much copy the language from the state general statutes, where they can either be nominated by a party or the candidate has one. Oh, I'm sorry. Waterford is 100 signatures. They have a specific number instead of the 1%. And Westport is again nominating on the basis of a petition, and they only require 25 electors on a petition. And Greenwich only requires 25 electors on a petition. So it seems some of the RTM type of towns either have the 1% that is mentioned in the state statute, or they come up with an absolute number. And I don't know whether you're aware of it or not, but as far as I know, in the 55 years in Madison, I'm the only person who was elected who submitted a petition to get on the ballot. And that was for an interim election because a member of the Board of Finance had to move out of town, and there was an election called, and the town committees didn't act. I don't know why. So I petitioned. I was a registered Republican at the time, not an affiliated voter. But as far as I know, that's an opportunity to get on the ballot, even in a town that doesn't have a statute that's or a town charter that says so. So it appears there's options to try to entice more unaffiliated voters by specifying it in the charter, whatever form of government that you're going to come up with recommending, and it might get passed. But I think the point is well taken. I can't recall who said it, but somebody said we're not really talking about getting nominated for a particular petition. We're talking about trying to get participation by 13,000 members of our town meeting.
Correct.
And the other thing is, you talked at your last meeting about registered voters, and I went into the Secretary of State's website and looked at who was registered before the last election. And it's interesting. I didn't realize they broke it down this way, so it was new to me. The old dog is still learning new tricks. In Madison, the total active unaffiliated voters was 5,182. The Democrat was 3,951. And I was surprised to find out the lowest number was a Republican, 3,802. And that added up in the state's numbers to 13,098. But there are 1,170 inactive voters under the three types of registration. So actually our voter list is 14,266 as of October 29th, 2019. And if my memory recalls, is that an active voter who is someone who has voted in one of the last, is it 3 or 4 elections? Do you know, Jane? Or do you know, Lauren? I don't recall exactly. Is a specific number. And the inactive voters are those, the 1170 are those who did not vote in the last several elections. And every 3 or 4 years, the registrars of voters canvass those people. They send them a card to the last mailing address, and very, very few of them have been returned. And the consensus is that these are people who have moved out of town. and they don't bother to call town hall and say, take me off the voting roll. It would be the last thing I would have in my mind if I moved out of Madison, is to call town hall and say, oh, by the way, take me off the voting roll. Somewhere I recall the state was trying to get a program together where they would have a statewide voting list, especially for people who come in and vote on voting day or try to vote and they're not on the list. You can bring up a statewide voting list of all voting lists in the state of Connecticut and find out if that person is registered in some other town. So this voting business is really a complex issue. And if, as I said, if you decide that you want to try to get more unaffiliated in, because they are 5,182 of the active voters, a couple of thousand more than the other two, or 1,500. Putting it in the charter, whatever form of government it is, putting it in the charter may attract them. Amen.
Thank you, Gus.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's very helpful. That is, and that's some more of the research that we'll do on the different form of governments as well. I still would like to talk to Branford or Waterford, whichever one would talk to us, just about, you know, pros and cons and different things. Gus, do you know if Branford has a town manager or a town?
They have a 3-member board of selectmen.
Okay.
If you have an RTM, the state specifies you have a 3-person board of selectmen.
Okay.
That's why in the thing that I recommended to the board of selectmen back in August, that they might consider a hybrid form of town manager, having a town manager and having something more than a 5 or a 7-member town council. Maybe have like a 9 or 13-member town council, which would have, you know, more people on it.
Okay.
It would be like a mini RTM. It would
Right.
be a hybrid between the two, a council and RTM.
Wow. Well, thank you for that.
Okay.
Appreciate it very much. We've got 10 minutes to go, and I just wanted to chat briefly about some of the, if anybody had anything to comment on with from the public forum. I thought some of the comments were really very lucid and helpful. We don't need to use names, I guess, but the second person in particular was talking about how the town has changed so much since he and his family had moved in. But then he made a comment, I don't know if anybody caught this, that a lot of people were transient in Madison and that people were going to be moving and not going to stay long term, you know, a certain percentage. I thought that was interesting. I don't see it, but
it'll be interesting to see how COVID-19 changes this, you know, because you know, a lot of times particularly you look at Fairfield County, right, with people going into the city or out of the city or whatnot. I mean, I would tend to think that now cities are going to be maybe not as desirable, at least for a certain period of time. So do you actually see more people, particularly from New York, coming into town?
we do.
And not having it as their second home or their third home, but maybe their primary.
Right.
Who knows?
Yeah.
But yeah, I did pick up on that too. And I think, you know, like for me, the sort of useful insight from that comment is that, you know, a lot of times we talk about how well the government works today. We are very blessed. We have people who care. We have people who are involved, but that's today. What's going to be in 5 years or 10 years or 15 years or whatever? And is that more what we should be thinking about? I mean, there's nothing to fix right now, but you know, if the makeup of the town changes and we don't have Jeans or Gus's or so on and so forth in town, then what? And that was sort of what I took from that transient comment, that if people are here for 2 years, maybe a 4-year term on a board of selectmen is nothing that they're looking for. Maybe if they're here for 2 years, maybe participating in any form of government is not what they're looking for. They're looking to walk down the sea view and walk home and go to bed. I don't know. But, you know, and that may be well beyond what we're chartered to do. But I think that is something that we should think about as we try to analyze these problems and think of these structures.
Right. And yeah.
And I would just add that, talking to real estate agents, you know, over the last, let's just say 10 or 15 years, you know, Madison used to be a great place to, you know, people that, you know, all the corporate jobs, et cetera, it was a great place to come. And you had people coming and going because they got transferred, but that was a big source of, you know, new home buyers. I think that whole landscape has changed significantly. I mean, Connecticut is not, you know, there's no corporate world here, and the world's changed. I mean, a lot of people, you know, can and do work from home or you know, travel. I mean, it is going to change. I think it's going to significantly change over the next several years. And so what we're trying to solve for is, we don't know what it's going to look like, but I think we can assume that the number of people that are going to step forward and take on a lot of these roles is probably going to diminish. I just have seen that. I think we're very fortunate that we are able to attract for boards and commissions and really, really good people. But come the day that we can't, we have to have a structure of government that can handle the size of, you know, our budgets and the amount of responsibility in a professional manner. And, you know, a 2-year term for a board, if you have a town manager, is not such a big deal. But if that remains the type of government and we don't make any changes, we've heard a lot of argument. I think more, I don't know, sometimes it gets fuzzy, but I think I've heard a lot more argument for thinking about a 4-year term versus a 2-year term. But again, that's from a practical that's from a, you know, the way it might work better. But the practical standpoint is, as Leo pointed out, who's going to come forward and say, yes, I'll commit to 4 years on a board. And I can tell you, I talked to Scott Murphy today, just ran into him at Stop and Shop, and he said, you know, this whole crisis, I mean, has put a lot of strain on the volunteers. I mean, the number of meetings and the issues that they have to, you know, and Bob, you talked about that, just, you know, having mostly volunteers, it's tough because they still have families, they still have job responsibilities that have changed. So this is a real test.
Well, we lost a committee member because of that, you know, so, you know, it's proof is right there. So for sure, you know, well, I'd like to continue this conversation. I'll add it back to the agenda, but we have 4 minutes until till the Board of Selectmen meeting. Lauren, where's the invite for that?
I sent it as a calendar invitation earlier today. I will resend it right now. And I'm actually going to leave this meeting.
Okay.
So I can start the Board of Selectmen meeting.
So if anybody, if you folks would love to get on the Board of Selectmen meeting, please join me on there. That'd be wonderful. Love to have you. And if you do, please don't let me be the only person talking when we talk about this. I'd love for them to hear what you have to say or any opinion, no matter what. So I solicit your opinion. I solicit your participation. So please feel free to do that. I'll take a motion to adjourn, unfortunately, because this was really going really well. Motion to adjourn. Is there a motion?
Moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Great. We're adjourned, and I'll see you in a few minutes. Thank you, Lauren. Thank you, everybody.
Bye.